Thank you. Thank you very much, Danny, and hello to everyone to this first in a series of 4 workshops that we planned for many, many months together with Yahad-In Unum, our partners, and I want to thank everyone at Yahad-In Unum for working with us on this very exciting 4-part series in partnership with the South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation. Wonderful to see my co-directors, Heather Blumenthal from the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Center, Mary Kluk from the Durban Holocaust and Genocide Center, and many members of the teams from Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban. It is also, of course, special to see our very good friend, Father Patrick Dubois, that opened actually in March 2019, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center's permanent exhibition and building. It is an honor to work with you, Father Dubois, again. The series will look at how do you teach and how do you look at the mass killing by the Einsatzgruppen and their collaborators in Eastern Europe during from Operation Barbarossa on, but of course throughout, and it marks 80 years since we started, since the invasion of the Soviet Union began on the 22nd of June of 1941. And what we are going to do just briefly in this series is to look at the methodology of Yahad-In Unum, at the way they investigate the crime. We will look at case studies. We will look at case studies in Poland, in the Ukraine, and then we will go in the 4th session to modern day genocide and modern day mass killing, many times tragically using the same methodologies by the perpetrators and killers. And we will look at ISIS crime, Daesh crimes in Iraq against the Yazidi, and we will look at the genocides, the Hutu crimes, the Interahamwe crimes in Rwanda in 1994. So in the next 4 weeks, please join us for this very, very informative and important series in partnership between the South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation and Yahad-In Unum. And now it is my honor to introduce to you someone that doesn't need much introduction, and this is Father Patrick Dubois, that is joining us today from France, but of course is very well known as the one that started Yahad-In Unum and the one that is working throughout Europe and in Iraq and Guatemala for the memory of the Holocaust and modern genocide to be understood, analyzed, prevented, and remembered. Father Dubois, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tali. It's such a pleasure to meet you from South Africa. It was a grace to be present and to be keynote speaker at the opening of this amazing Holocaust Museum that you dare to open in Johannesburg to heal the society and more globally, Africa. Today will be a very special session. It's the beginning of a training. As you know, since 17 years, we go from village to village, from city to city, to interview the people who were present at the mass killing of the Jews and Roma by German or their collaborator. We have interviewed more than 8,000 people, simple people, poor people, who had nothing to lose, and so wanted to speak before to die. I will never forget one farmer. He told me, "Father, I have 1,532 Jews in my garden, and nobody came back since 42. So in many cases, we are the only one or the first one to come back and to raise the question, were you here the day of the shooting? And if the person says yes, say you were present at the killing, And do you accept to be interviewed with a cameraman? And 99% say yes. It's why we have saved the memory of the Soviet people who were present at the killing, sometimes being curious, sometimes willing to watch, sometimes willing to take something. And they deliver their secret. All that is video recorded, all that is accessible. And I'm very, very pleased to see that Katya will be the speaker because she's handling an interactive map. She will explain you to make that accessible. Why do we do that? Why to stay 17 years from village to village in the snow or in the rain, sometimes under the sun, in difficult places? You know, because we realize that more than 2 million people have been assassinated. Every person has been killed by one person. It was not a camp, no train, no gas chamber, no railway. Every killer saw his victim, every victim saw his killer. One bullet, one Jew, one bullet. So we have to come back to this awful tragedy that so many Germans left beautiful cities from Germany, left Köln, Düsseldorf, Berlin, Munich, to spend 3 years from 41 to 44 to assassinate children, babies, grandma, anyone, because they were born Jew or Roma. And we have to dig in this mystery, because unfortunately it was very successful. We never went in a village where a German didn't succeed to kill the Jews. Why we have to study that? Because today there are still shootings in the planet, still bombing, still attacks every day. Every day in Europe, every day in Kabul, every day in Syria, every day in Iraq, sometimes frequently in France. We have to study because the mass killers came back to this genocide handmade, one by one. So I wish all of you not to look only at the past and to say it was terrible, it was awful, but to look at the present and to say how we can heal the young generation who can have the same temptation to leave their home, join Al-Qaeda, join ISIS, or join white hate groups or racist groups who have only one will: to assassinate other people. I wish all of you a wonderful seminar. I'm so pleased that South African Museum is taking such a leadership to heal the planet.
Thank you so much, Father, for that wonderful introduction to the seminar. Katarina Dusenko is going to be running the seminar for us, the first two seminars, and I'm very excited to introduce her. Katarina was born in Ukraine, and she's deeply interested in the Holocaust history that has marked much of her country's history and identity. She joined Yahad-In Unum in 2010. After she started as a translator in the field missions, she became a part of the core team in the Paris office very soon. Today, she's a project manager of the In Evidence interactive map, which I'm sure she's going to be telling us about. So far, she has participated in several dozen research investigations throughout Eastern Europe in order to collect the oral memory about the Holocaust by bullets and the evidence of the Nazi crimes denied by some today. She is as well part of the investigation team that conducts the research in Romania and interviews the Roma survivors deported to Transnistria under the Antonescu regime. Katarina participates as an educator in different international workshops and seminars for teachers and educators organized in partnership with the Cayenne Memorial Museum and Yad Vashem, as well as annual international conferences on Jewish genealogy in the US. Katarina, welcome and thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. First of all, I would like to say that it's an honor for us, for every member of Yahad-In Unum, to participate in this seminar. I will definitely talk about the in evidence interactive map because it's like my baby, but it will be during the next session, during the second session. So I hope I will not make you bored and you all will come back during the next session. But during this session, we will have a quick, I will first try to share my screen. We will start with the, do you see my presentation, everyone, right?
Yes.
Yes, it's okay. So during this session, we will have a quick overview about the historical background of what happened during the occupation or what during the Second World War, what is the Holocaust by bullets. And after that, I will explain more precisely what is the methodology that Yahad-In Unum implement during its researches and which kind of testimonies, which kind of results you can find, we can find while we work in the field. So first of all, we will start with the historical background in Eastern Europe before the Second World War. As you know, the Second World War officially started in September 1939 when Poland was occupied by Soviet Union and Germany. And as a result of Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Soviet, as you can see on the map, just wait, I will grab my sticker. Pointer. So you see all this part that used to belong to Poland, which is nowadays Western Ukraine and Western Belarus, it became occupied by the Soviet Union. So when I will skip a little bit, but when during the researches, we're also interested not only in the Holocaust, but also in this small period, because we can, when we interview our witnesses, we can see what was the mood, what was the relationship during these 2 years when the Soviet Union occupied, what was interaction between Jewish and non-Jewish population. So this is very interesting. But before to go more in details, first of all, let's talk why there were so many Jews in Eastern Europe. As maybe some of you are aware, there was the Pale of Settlement that was installed by the Catherine the Great in 1791. Basically, it was the territory on which the Jews were allowed to live, but they were exempt still from some big cities. And most of this, you see, it's today's territory of Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, some part of Poland, some part of Estonia and Lithuania. So this is where the Jews were allowed to live. And this is where the shtetls were established. That's why if we compare, that's why we know that the Jews who lived there, they were numerous. And that's why the majority of the killings that were carried out, they were carried out on the territory of Eastern Europe. I'm sorry, just next. So as you can see in this area, there were about 5 million Jews. Those numbers are taken from different census. One of the biggest Jewish community was living in Ukraine. They were about 2.5 million. This Pale of Settlement that I showed you previously, in 1897, 94% of Jews of the Russian Empire lived there. On the eve of the Second World War, they were about 57%. But like I said, it's give us a better understanding of why those the number of victims that were killed during the Holocaust by bullets is so big, is because most of the Jews were concentrated on these territories. Now we will go back a little bit on the history. As we said, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was broken, and on June 22, 1941, the Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union. As we all know, this is the Operation Barbarossa. We celebrated 80 years anniversary this year, and everything started basically from there. On this slide, you can see the death camps and the sites of the mass shooting that were identified by Yahad. These dots that you can see, they are not all of them, because first of all, Yahad is still carrying the investigation trips. We're still identifying new sites. But before this Holocaust by bullets was almost unknown, because this history for a long time remained unknown, and only like a little percentage of historians has had access to this information. But with the collapse of Soviet Union and with the in 1991, most the Soviet archives were opened and all this information emerged. Because after the war, just right after the liberation, there was a big, I will talk about it a little bit later, but it was a Soviet commission that investigated on the Nazi crimes. And from 45 till 91, all this information was hidden and not everyone had access to these documents. But once it was opened, we found out that there is still arguing about the number of the victims, but about third part of all Holocaust victims were killed in Eastern Europe by Holocaust by bullets. We know that there were 6 million of Jews that were killed. So according to different historians, 1.5 million to 2 million Jews were killed in Eastern Europe. So this is what Yahad is working on, and as you can see from this map, you can find the execution sites in Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Belarus, but also you can find them deep in the Caucasus, where the occupation lasted only 6 months. But from this map, we can see how the idea of executing, of annihilation of Jewish population was deep in mind of each German soldier, of units, of everyone, that they, even during, if they stayed in the village for 1 week, for 3 days, no matter what, they still looked for the last Jew to kill it and to fulfill their mission. What is Holocaust by bullets? What are the particularities of the Holocaust by bullets, and why the Holocaust by bullets is different from the Holocaust? The Holocaust by bullets is, I would say, an important part of the Holocaust and of the Jewish history, and not only Jewish history, but in history in general. The Holocaust by bullets was specific because the murderers came to the victims. They came to the places where the victims were living. They came to kill them. It was not a machine. It was, like Patrick Dubois said, it was a man killing a man. So it was a humanized process when the perpetrators came to kill their victims at the place where they were living. Second, it was the executions were carried out by mobile squads, mobile units. So they were moving from one town to another, and they needed a large autonomy and adjustment to the place where the execution were conducted. That's why they needed to involve local structures. They needed to involve local people to help them to carry out the executions. And each time this mobile squad, they had also to adjust not only to the landscapes, but also to the temperature, to the time. If we say about the first shooting, they were carried in summer 1941, but when they advanced more to the east in the Soviet Union, for example, they would arrive at Donbass area, it's eastern Ukraine, by November, and back then the winters were rather rude, so the soil, the ground was already frozen. They needed to adjust to this. They couldn't dig the pits. They couldn't, because the ground was frozen and it took too much time for them, so they needed to find another ways to kill the Jews. In these cases, they find the mines that were already there, they find the trenches, and like this. So we're talking about the adjustment to the local structures, to the landscapes, and to the temperature conditions. Another particularity of the Holocaust by bullets is that it was made in broad daylight. It was public. It was in rare cases, according to what we have found on the field, they would take the Jews deep to the forest where they would then kill, and no one would witness this. But in most of the cases, it was done during the day. The villagers, other villagers, non-Jewish, they could witness it. They could see what happened to their neighbors. In many cases, children who are now our witnesses, they would follow the column just because they were curious or just because they know that in the column there were their classmates. So they wanted to understand what was happening and where they were taken to. So they followed and they saw all the process of the execution and all the process of the killing. In some cases, the villagers were forced to watch the executions because it was done on purpose to show this was happened to Jews, and if you will not follow our orders, that would happen to you the same. So that's how until now, after I don't know, like 180 trips that we have made in Eastern Europe, we still find witnesses who either watched the executions or went to the ghettos or followed the column either by curiosity or were forced or were requisitioned for others for some times of work. About the requisition, I will talk separately in order to show you what it is. Another feature, like I said, of the Holocaust Babel is that it was global. It didn't happen only in Babi Yar or in Kaunas or in Ponari or in Minsk, in big cities, towns that we know. It happened all over Eastern Europe, in every village, in every shtetl where the Jews lived. And the execution started in some cases from 1939 and lasted until 1944. I wanted just to show you a small excerpt of the testimony. It's just 1 minute to show you, to prove, not to prove, but to show what we can find from the testimonies once we are there. I'm sorry, can you hear the sound?
Yes, we can.
Wait. Can you hear or no? The sound? No.
We can hear and we can read the subtitles, so you can go ahead.
Still no. I'm sorry for this.
No problem. We can hear it and see it, so you can just put it in full screen mode. That'll be great.
Still nothing. No.
Can you hear us? Because we could hear him before.
I'm sorry. We even checked before.
Yeah, but we could hear. Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
I will come back. I will come back. Okay. Anyway, it has the subtitles, so you will be able to read the testimony. Oh, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry. It's frozen. We can hear you and the sound. Please play. Okay, sorry.
Katarina, maybe we can try, I don't know if it's frozen, if maybe play the video again, or maybe we should, or...
It's frozen. Okay, I'm sorry. Just because I read, I think like this should be better. I'm really sorry. Even with you, we checked before, but...
Not a problem. It's working fine. Not a worry. I'm sure we're all very excited.
Can you hear it now or no? It's not frozen or it's still frozen?
It's just not playing.
Okay. I'll just disconnect for a moment. So now it should be good. Do you see it or no? Still no?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So this is what many witnesses saw. This is what they talk about, and they're willing to talk about once we come. Most of them give their testimonies for the first time. Like Patrick said, there are many witnesses who are saying like, I have been waiting for you all my life, so to tell you this story because nobody else came before and nobody else was interested in the story. So there's many stories of this, and we will see after how we make the interview and how we make them talk about this traumatized experience that they had. But for now, let's continue with the historical overview. As you can see from this map, there is a timeline of the Holocaust that happened in the death camps and the Holocaust by bullets. Like you see, it gives us an idea of when the execution started and who were the first victims. Like I said, one of the first, as you can see from this timeline diagram, the decision actually to execute all the Jews that was taken on the Wannsee conference on January 20, 42. It was only in 42, and from there the mass execution at the death camp started. Although in the east, the execution started right away after the Operation Barbarossa. One of the first executions was in Poland, in Ostrów Mazowiecka, on November 11, 1939. The first victims, most of the time, the first victims were male. They were Jews, but also the intelligentsia, also the communists. Why they were executed? Why they were the first victims? First of all, they were the ones the most intelligent one, and then those who can conduct the resistance, who can resist. So the Germans decided to eliminate them first. There is another series of massacres that happened just right after the Germans or Romanian invaded the territories. They are known under the name of the pogrom. Those pogroms were sporadic. They were most of the time based, they were orchestrated either by Germans or by Romanian security service in case of Iași in Romania. But a lot of locals, a local population, Ukrainian, Moldavans, Romanians, they participated in those pogroms. I let you watch a small propaganda film, German propaganda film, in which I think you will understand, but we will talk later about how these pogroms were made.
Deutsche Verbände im Vormarsch auf Lemberg. Auch das sind sowjetrussische Straßen. Lemberg, die Stadt zeigt Spuren schwersten Kampfes. Bayerische Gebirgsjäger, die gleichen Truppen, die schon im Herbst 1939 felsenhaft um Lemberg gekämpft haben, eroberten auch diesmal wieder die Stadt. Die ukrainische Bevölkerung empfängt unsere Soldaten begeistert als Befreier vom Blutterror des Bolschewismus. Die jüdischen Agenten der GPU hatten kurz vor der Räumung der Stadt unzählige wehrlose ukrainische Nationalisten schier hingeschlachtet. Tausende unschuldiger Männer und Frauen fielen dabei dem bolschewistischen Blutrausch zum Opfer. Vor dem Lemberger Untersuchungsgefängnis. Hier verübten diese Bestien in Menschengestalt die grausigsten Mordtaten. Um die Spuren ihrer unbeschreiblichen Verbrechen überwischen, stehen die aneinander angehörigen Gruppen das Gefängnis in Brand. Das Feuer wurde jedoch gelöscht. Und so konnte diese ungeheuerliche Untat restlos aufgedeckt werden. Die Opfer dieser bestialischen Mordlust werden zur Identifizierung herausgetragen. Männer und Frauen, Kinder und Greise, nichts entging diesen Ungeheuern in Menschengestalt. Mit Messern, Äxten, Handgranaten und Maschinengewehren wurden diese unschuldigen Opfer bolschewistischer Mordgier grausam gemartert und hingeschlachtet. Mordgesindel, das mit den GPU-Agenten Hand in Hand gearbeitet hatte, wird von der empörten Menge den deutschen Truppen zur Bestrafung ausgeliefert. Eine grauenerregende Auslese von Lemberger Sowjettypen. Plünderer, Marodeure, in der Hauptsache Juden. Das sind die Bundesgenossen Churchill und seiner Plutokratenblicke.
So the GPU agents, GPU is like secret service in Russian. They call it them also NKVD. So before the retreat of the Soviet Soviet army, NKVD killed a lot of people in the prisons. According to some estimation, there were 22,000 victims. Among them, there were not only Ukrainians, but also Poles and Jews. And in case of, for example, Lviv, Lemberg, back then, the Jews were forced to take out the corpses from the prisons, from the basements, and the Germans decided to play on the pretext that there were many Jews in NKVD. That's why there were Jews who killed those prisoners. So they encouraged, let's say, the local population to participate in the pogroms. There is no exact number of Jews who were killed in pogroms in Lviv, but it is estimated that during yesterday was the first day of the pogrom, so during the 3 days of the pogrom, around 5,000 Jews were killed. And such pogroms were not only in Lviv, but also in Baltic states. It was in Lutsk, it was in Zolochiv. So we can see that it's not only German who participated in massacres, but also the local population in these cases of the pogroms. The next mass executions already starts in August. Many knows about the mass executions in Kamensk-Podolsky, where about 23,000 Jews were killed. But in these cases, it's not only women, it's not only men, but also women and children. And these mass executions, it's not only in Kamensk-Podolsk, but if we take all the region of Kamensk-Podolsk, as you can see here on the map, it's on the border with Moldova. A little bit. So this kind of executions where men, women, children, elder people are killed are conducted in whole region. We can talk about the intensification of the executions from late August, fall 1941. In these cases, the number of the victims rises a lot and the execution became more and more systematic. Those people who are not killed after the first actions, they are in many cases, they are confined to the ghetto, the special created places. I'm sorry. The places were especially created, where only most of them are made in the areas where the Jews lived before the war. It depends on the area, of course. It depends on the period, because the first ghetto, for example, in Minsk, it was established in July 41, but the majority of the ghettos were established in autumn or in 42, in spring 42. As we cross-reference the testimonies that we have, the information that we have, these ghettos, if in the beginning they remained open, then very often they are closed. They are fenced in either with barbed wire, either with fence. It's very often guarded by the local policemen, and the Jews are forbid. They are not allowed to go out from the ghetto and to leave the territory. And the local population would come from time to time to bring some food, to exchange the food for clothes, to barter, or to take Jews, for example, also to bring them to work. So these ghettos are part of the Holocaust, and we have witnesses who talk about this ghettos and explain how everything worked. They explain how were the conditions in the ghetto, because you can imagine that these ghettos were mostly established in big villages. So the Jews from the little villages where they were transported to the ghetto, it was overcrowded. Very often there was a typhus that broke out because of the overcrowding and poor hygiene, but also because it was cold, no food, no water, and all this condition you can imagine yourself. This is an example of the ghetto. This one in the Minsk. It was one of the largest ghetto. By end of August, it was established, like I said, in July, and by end of August, it numbered about 100,000 Jews. And they continued to live in the ghetto, and most of the ghettos, after they are liquidated in 1942, by special units. We will talk about them later. And the last victims to be killed, they're most often the artisans and specialists, because why they're the last, it's just pragmatic, practical reason, just because Germans needs them for their services, because they are the shoemakers, they're the tailors, they're doctors, dentists, so Germans need them to repair their shoes, to heal them, to fix their tooth pains and all this. So they keep them until the last, and they're the last ones with their families to be killed. Who conducted those executions? As we know, after the operation of Barbarossa, the Wehrmacht goes to the east, and there is special squads that follows the army. They are the mobile squads, and they are divided in 4 groups, A, B, C, D, and each group is divided either in their subgroups, let's say. In all, there are 3,000 men, sorry. In all, there are 3,000 men who kills almost 1.5 million victims. Each group, like I said, they are divided geographically. So, for example, Einsatzgruppen group in this one, it goes from, it gets like Baltic countries and north of Russia. Another one, it's moves on the territory of the Belarusia till the region of Smolensk and Bryansk. Another one, the most famous because they participated in the Babi Yar execution. So they take the north of Ukraine. And another, the Einsatzgruppe D, they work, I'm sorry, on the south of Ukraine, Crimea, and south of Russia. Like we said, there were 3,000 men. So how those 3,000 men could kill so many people? There is an answer on that, because they were not the only unit who participated in the executions. They were helped by the police battalions. The police battalions, first they were tasked to maintain the order on the territories, occupied territories, and also to fight against the partisans. But like you see, they participated largely in the liquidation of the ghettos in 42-43. And one of the famous police battalion, it was described by Christopher Browning in his book, Ordinary Men. He was talking about the police battalion 101, who participated in liquidations of the ghetto in the Lublin district. There was also the Waffen-SS, who, along with the Wehrmacht, participated in the battles, but from time to time they were asked to fight against the partisans. They were the one, for example, they carried out many actions against the civilians and the villages in Belarusia and Ukraine, where they destroyed completely the villages because of the partisans. One of the famous unit was Panzer Division Viking. It was not famous, but a particularity of this, that there were not only Germans who participated, but also other Europeans, like people from Finland, from France, and others. Another unit, it was said it was the Wehrmacht. Why they're interesting for us? Most often the Wehrmacht participated in logistic task, because all the Jews, if the place of the execution was so too far from the place where the Jews lived, so they gave the trucks, they gave munition, they provided submachine guns for the executions. And you can see here, like all the soldiers on the back, very often, because they were not, like when they were sent back to the rear during the battle for rest, it was a kind of curiosity for them, it was a kind of entertainment for them to come and to watch the executions. And many of them took pictures as a souvenir from those times. So Thanks to some of the soldiers, we still have pictures today as proofs to what happened to the Jewish communities in those villages. Another and very important unit that helped Germans, they were the Schutzmannschaft or Hilfspolizei. They were the local policemen who would join the police that was created just after the German occupied the territory. And they were the key persons, let's say, in the process of the execution. Why that? First of all, because they were the only one who knew who were Jew and who wasn't Jew. Let's say, for example, in Western Ukraine and Western Belarus, it was rather easy to distinguish a Jew from not a Jew in the village, because Jews were like more traditional Hasidic Jews. They were wearing long traditional dresses. They had beards. But if we take Soviet, more go in the Eastern Ukraine, the Jews were completely Sovietized. So there was no big difference between a Jewish person and not a Jewish villager. So there were the policemen who would say, this is a Jew and this is not a Jew. And they were the one most often who would gather the Jew either to take them to the ghettos or to take them to the executions directly. Another thing that they would help with is to provide Germans with the information where the execution could be made, because they knew, for example, where the anti-tank ditches had been dug before the retreat of the Soviet army, where was the ravine in the village, where was the forest. So they were the ones who would help the Germans in their task. And we do have testimonies and also archives from the KGB archives that say that some of the policemen, they participated directly in the executions, or they would take even an initiative to kill the Jews by themselves. There is another also category of people, but I will talk a little bit later to who we will talk about it and say, because we can't say that they participated, they were collaborators, the people who were requisitioned, who were forced to do one on another task. So now I will talk quickly about the work Yahad does, how many testimonies we identified so far. So like you see, this is all the territory that was identified, was worked by Yahad. It's not all, like I said. There is, for example, this Kharkiv region, Lugansk region. There is no possibility for us to go there because of the war between Ukraine and Russia. So for many political reasons, there are some places, hopefully we worked in the Crimea, but for some, we're still like working in Estonia. There are some places that we definitely will come back because it takes really a lot of time to cover all this territory. The collection of our testimonies, we started to work in 2004 with the Ukraine. That's why you see here that most of the testimonies that we have are in Ukraine, and most of the mass graves were identified. The majority of the mass graves are also in Ukraine for two reasons, because we started first, was the Ukraine was the first country to start, and for second reason, because the Ukrainian Jewish population was the biggest in the Soviet Union. So the mass executions there were more massive than on other territories. Who are our witnesses? Most of them average, they have 89 years old. So at the moment of the events, let's say during the Second World War, they had from 10 to 15 years old. We do have percentage of people who were adults back then, but it's mostly women, because young men were taken and drafted to the army, but they are not the best witnesses for us, because those who had like 18, 17 years old, they were, let's say, smarter. They wouldn't go see the executions because they knew what it was. Many of our witnesses says, like, I was stupid back then. If not, like, now I understand what it was, that it was awful to go watch the execution. If it was now, I wouldn't go. So those people, like, the children, it's just because they were children, they were curious, so they would go and would see what was happening. We do have more female witnesses than male, just because the life expectancy in Eastern Europe for men is very low, but still we do have pretty much male witnesses. They're different nationalities. Most of our witnesses are literate, but when we say literate, is those who finished school. So because they live in remote villages, so they didn't have any chance to go to universities and others, and 35% are illiterate. And different religion we do. We interview more the bystanders, the neighbors, but we also have in our collection some testimonies of the survivors who still live in Eastern Europe today. What kind of witnesses do we have? Like we talk about requisitioned, and I will explain a little bit more in details later. We do have neighbors who were just there, like in their garden, in school, working, or like their house was just in front of the cemetery, or their house was just the last on the street. So they saw the events, the column, or the ghetto, or the execution from their house. There was forced witnesses. We talk about them. They were curious, the children. The majority of our witnesses are the curious ones. Because like I said, they were just children, they were following the column, they wanted, this is like a big event for them, they live in their villages, nothing happened, and then Germans arrived, this is the first event, and then something else happened, there is a lot of people gathered, there's trucks, there's cars, there's motorcycles, so they were curious to go to see. And there's also accidental witnesses, those who were, for example, in the forest gathering mushrooms, and they saw a group of Jews being brought. So they couldn't escape because the Germans would think that they were Jewish and they would kill them. And so they stayed there and watching what was happening. This categories of witnesses is mostly our internal category, because it's very difficult to to classify the witnesses. First of all, because some of them can move from one category to another. For example, he was forced to watch, and then he was forced to fill in the pit or move the bodies or something else, or he was like accidental, but he had a possibility to go away, but he stayed because he was curious. So it's just for us to classify and to give an approximate idea of which testimonies you can find if you request the information from our archives. So for now, we'll talk about requisition people. There was this system actually of requisition existed a long time before the Germans arrived. In the Soviet Union, it was rather common for people to be requisitioned to do some jobs, because everything was collective. There was collective farms. They have collective tools, horses, and everything. So people were used to be asked to do for different tasks. For instance, to dig a pit for the potatoes, or to come bring someone from, I don't know, from the railway station. So this system, the Germans appropriated it for their use. And these people, like you see here, for example, these people on the right side, the requisition, they're digging the pit, and then during the execution, they stay on the background watching the execution. So if we have requisition people as testimonies, they are very important for us, because they participated, let's say, in all the stages of the execution, and they can provide many details that curious people or accidental test witnesses, they wouldn't see, just because they were afraid to watch, they were afraid to come too far or too close, sorry. So they didn't see many details, although the requisition people, they are the one who provides most of the details. And just I will play you. This is, for example, they were requisitioned for the shooting. This is on the right. You have Bronnaya Gora. It's located in Belarusia. About 50,000 people were killed there. And you can see that people were requisitioned from the small villages located far away. And in all, there were around 600, 800 diggers who were requisitioned from the local people. There was also, oops, moving. This I would like to play you a small excerpt of a person who was requisitioned for digging the pit.
On here.
So as you can see, these people, they were forced. So we can discuss if they could refuse. For example, in some cases, like you see, the lady said, many of them knew already what they would do, so they escaped. So they tried to find their escape possibilities, but in many cases they were just forced to do it because they didn't have any other choice. There is different type of requisition that was, this lady was requisitioned to dig the pit, some were requisitioned to dig, then to fill after the pit, some were requisitioned to arrange the bodies in the pits themselves, others were requisitioned like this man, for example, to transport the Jews from the small village, first of all to the ghetto, and then from the ghetto to the railway station. And after, once the Jews were deported, he was also charged with gathering their belongings and bring them to the railway station, because all the belongings that belonged to the Jewish people. They were taken by the Germans, the good ones, and sent back to the Reich. So there is a really very different type of requisition that we met, like requisitioned witnesses who during our research trips we met, and who gave us their stories that you can also have access to. So now we will talk more about the methodology that Yahad has and how we work. First of all, I want to say that we have two kinds of methodology. First of all, the first methodology is how to conduct an interview, how to talk to people this age who are lived under the Soviet regime, who are a little bit let's say frightened, or because sometimes they say, like, if we ask them, do you want to speak, can you speak please, they say they like make a joke, do you think KGB will come and kill me or what? So they're still afraid of this Soviet KGB secret services, but we still make them comfortable and they still deliver their testimonies. And another methodology is more an investigation methodology, which is a little bit hybrid between historian and a police investigation, but we'll talk a little bit later. So first of all, how do we search for these witnesses, first of all, and how we make them talk? We have a team of about 10 people. We do have investigators. So these are the first people who has the first contact, is here on the picture, the first contact with the witness. We never go all 10 people together. These investigators are local people who speak local languages, who know local cultures, traditions. So they are the one who have the first contact with witnesses and who ask if what they saw, if they want to speak to the main team, and if they say yes, then only then we arrive the main team. But once again, it's only the translator who goes, because the translator is a key person who established the eye contact, who established the trust between witness and the translator. So she or he is the second person who goes directly to the witnesses and says that there is a team, there is camera, and there is a photographer with photo camera. So if you can, if you want, please let us in, and we will take the interview. And only at the end, if the witness says yes, he meets all the team comes either in-house or outside the house to deliver the testimony. How does the testimony goes, the interview goes? So as you see on the picture, and most often it's the translator who is the direct contact. So the interviewer who asks the question in French, and another translator and the cameraman, they stay a little bit on the back. So the witness can have only direct contact eye and direct interaction with the translation, with the translator. We do have a chronology when we ask questions. We start all the time before the war, during the war, and after the war. It's very important for us to place the witness in the context of the before war life, because each witness has its story, each witness has its personality, its family history. If we talk about the Western Ukraine, many of the witnesses' families were persecuted by the Soviets, so we're interested in that. So we start to ask questions about the witness life, about his family, about his parents, that makes him comfortable at the same time, and brings us into the period of the before war, so we can start to conduct the interview. Then the second step is when the Germans arrived. Like I said, it was the village, nothing happened. So every witness remembers about how the Germans came, each of them. And they say they came, they described, they came, they were horseback, the horses were so beautiful, the Germans were so handsome, they had white shirts, and they described how it happened. We try to do it chronologically, like I said, but if the witnesses skip from time to time from one subject to another subject, we let them do it. So it depends really individually. Many of them are in their late 80s, 90s. Some of them don't have the same memory as they did before. And some of them, it's very difficult. If they want to say something, they would say it, no matter which question we will ask. So first we'll let them speak. I would let them tell what they want to tell, and then we continue the story chronologically. When they talk, we don't judge them, especially, for example, some of the witnesses saying that when the Jews were gathered, they would go in the houses and they would take something from the houses. In this case, I mean, we understand because it was the war. They explained that there was nothing to wear. So in our case, we don't judge them because it's not our position to judge. We just want them to deliver the information they have, and it's up to someone else to do the judgment. We do have the questions with multiple choice questions. It concerns more about the dates, for example, because back then witnesses, they were little, they didn't have notion of time, they didn't have watches, they didn't have phones. So for them, it's difficult when we say, for example, when the execution happened. And for us, it's not the priority because we know what happened, which date it happened from the archives. But we still ask them if it was cold, if it was hot, if it was green day and sunny day as today, to give them, let's say, a frame where they can situate themselves, and also put, like, in their mind, they can put in that day when it happened, to say when it was. And like I said, we are in rural conditions, we're in the rural place, so many witnesses, when they talk about the dates or the period, they refer to the rural cultural traditional events. For example, they say that it must have happened in late August or early September because it was the harvest, or it happened on the Easter day or any other religious holiday, and that's why they remember. Or it happened because they have small pigs that had just born, and most often it's in the spring. So that's how they described on their own way. And after, it's on us, first of all, to cross-reference with the archives, because we have the dates, and to cross-reference with other interviews, with other testimonies, if he's telling the truth or not. We let them talk, we let them say what they have. We pay attention. This is a part of our investigation as investigators, like a police investigation. We pay attention to the details. For example, we ask them if the uniform was green or gray. You would say that he wouldn't remember that because he was too little, and many of them say, no, I don't remember. I didn't pay attention to the uniform. But sometimes when we ask for one detail, they would recall another detail. For example, they say, no, I don't remember the color of the uniform, but I remember that they had skull and bones symbol, or that they have a swastika, or another detail, or that they had an armband or something else. So the details are important, and even though maybe some witness would not remember this color of the uniform, another will, and this is important for us to reconstruct, because the idea of the goal of our investigation is to reconstruct the crime in a specific village. We don't take it macro history. We're not interested in why would they kill them, what unit would kill it. For us, it's not. I mean, it is important, but it's not the goal of our investigation. For us, it's important to understand how the Jews were arrested, by whom, from where to where they were taken, to if they were gathered before somewhere, where is the execution was conducted, where is the execution site, if it's not marked, and how the crime scene looked, where like the details of the crime scene in the specific place. So this is the importance, and this is the part of our methodology. So I will describe how we work on a specific place and what kind of information we can get after the field research. So this is a Pogrebisha. It's a small village in Vinnytsia in Ukraine. The pre-war Jewish population was 50%, and it was occupied on July. As you can see on the right, I'm sorry, there were, a moment, because you can see, oh, there were 5 execution sites in this area, in one village, 5 execution sites. So before to go in a trip, we worked, like we said, in the archives. We have Soviet archives. This is the commission that carried out their investigation just after the liberation. These archives are available in Moscow, in Washington Memorial Museum. Yad Vashem has these archives. After, there is also the KGB archives. This is the security services, but it's only Ukraine that opened the KGB archives. Russia still doesn't give access to that. These are the trials of the policemen who participated either directly or indirectly in the Holocaust. And we do have German archives. We have Einsatzgruppe reports and after-war trials. And for different countries, we have, for example, in Poland, we have Polish archives additional. In Romania, Moldova, we have Romanian and Moldovan archives. So while working, we have people who work on those. This is an example of how the archives look. The problem with the Soviet archives, there is very often it's written handwritten, so it's very difficult to read them. But some pages are printed, and this is just an example of what we found for the specific village in the archives. So as you can see, we have the approximate how many victims were. From this, I will have after a diagram timeline where you will see better what we found in each archive. Then we have the German archives, which give us the date, the number of perpetrators, the unit, the Gestapo unit, how many people were arrested, the number of the victims. So when we go already in the village and look for the for the witnesses, we have an approximate information. So when we ask if the witness saw something, we ask him because we know already that the execution happened. And we just don't go to any village and ask any elder people if he saw something, because there is no sense. We have like this, you will see this is the map, for example, that is established before each research trip. As you can see, there is different colors items. So this green means that is victims were Jewish, and also the number of the victims. For example, Nova Preluka, you have 2,500. This information is taken from the archives. Then you have yellow is already the places that are already had been investigated by Yahad, because for example, in the region of Vinnytsia, we had at least 5 trips because it's rather big and there is a lot of places. You also see this red stars. This is the camps of the prisoners of war. You have also ghettos, camp or ghettos with a black circle. So all this information is taken from the archives and from the historical books, works that we have until today. So we know that, for example, in Kalinivka, there was execution. So we go in Kalinivka and we go just nearby villages, like say 1-2 kilometers away, because as we saw in Brodnaya Gora, many requisitioned people were requisitioned from the villages nearby. So that's how we make, like say, itinerary for us to understand where we should work and in which village we should go during our investigation. In this Pogrebisha, we interviewed 2 persons, 2 men, Serhiy and Anton. You see that the year they were born are different. Anton is older, Serhiy is younger. They delivered each their story, and what we do is also we cross-reference not only the information between the archives and the testimonies, but we also cross-reference the information between the testimonies themselves, because in some cases they would see different events. They would see from different sites, from different points. We will see this during our next session when we'll work on the study case of Ukraine, but some witnesses would stay too close to the execution site, some would say on another side, so they have different perspective and different points of view that is very interesting to compare and to in order to understand the process, the crime, how it was carried out. So from their testimonies, we could identify the location where the Jews were gathered before being taken to the execution. In what we noticed after all these years of investigation, and of course it's not everywhere the same, but we could establish 5 steps of crime, which are more or less repeated in every village. So first, the Jews, the route, they're taken, they're gathered. In this case, is location of the Jewish school where they were gathered, and then stadium. Then you have the road where the column passed. Then you have the shooting and the addressing site. This is exactly the witness took us where the execution was. And during all this process, you have also the looting. So the 5 steps of the crime in most of the cases is roundup, road, undressing, shooting, and the looting. The looting happens, let's say, it can happen during the roundup when the local people would go to the houses and take some things that they would think the Jews wouldn't need it anymore, or during the road when let's say someone would come and take, or on the undress where on the side during the undressing they would take from the. Sometimes the addressing is happen on the place where they were rounded up. So because the clothes would stay there for a while and people would come and pick some clothes. Or it can be after, once the clothes is gathered in a place, it can be looted as well. If we take this reconstruction of the crime step by step, in case of Pogrebisha, we knew from the archives that the beginning of the action was October 18. Jews were rounded up. They were taken to the execution site by truck, and the execution was conducted by Einsatzkommando 5 and the police battalion. And at the end of action, we had 1,761 victims. What the field research brought, the testimonies brought into light, that before being rounded up at the stadium, the Jews were gathered first. They were gathered in the school, the picture that we saw previously. They were gathered 3 days before. Before being taken after to the execution site, there was a district governor who made the speech. How we know that? Because said he, one of the witnesses, he was forced together with other population, with other villages, to come to the stadium, and then he was forced to follow the column and to see the execution. So that's how he brought all these details that the Jews, for example, those who weren't able to walk, they were brought by truck, while others were taken on foot. On the site, they were stripped naked, and they were shot. He gives more details on how the execution was conducted. If they were shot in groups of 50, and there was local police who participated, and it lasted until evening. But what is more important for us, and because it's very difficult to find when we talk about victims, we talk most of the time about the numbers, how many victims were killed, but it's very important to tell each story of each Jew that was killed. If it was, it's important to tell his story, his name. This what Sergei gave us, because they were his classmates. He gave us the information that among the victims there were his classmates. There was Lev Bronstein, there was Isa and Edik, and it's very important for us to get this information, because it's combines, completes the database that Yad Vashem has. I will say, I will skip this in a moment. For example, this is the page from Yad Vashem database, where you have Bronstein Lev, the same Lev Bronstein who's Sergei's classmate, but here you have just the date of his murder. It's written 1941, and that's all. That's all the information that they have from Bronstein's family. And thanks to the witness, Sergei, we could identify the place where Bronstein Lev was and his family was killed. Because as you remember, in this village, there is 5 execution sites. So, and when we do have some lists of victims that were established by the Soviet Commission in 45, 44, just after the liberation, but most of them are not complete. Some of them were they just took the census, the pre-war census of people who lived in the village, and they put them as if they're as if they were killed. But in case if there were multiple executions in the village, there is no information during which execution they were killed. It was just the information they were killed, and that's all. So in these cases, once again, I would like to say that these testimonies that we collect are crucial, and you can find this information in our interactive map that we will talk about during the next session. Another, what we do after after the interview, as we said, we start the interview, we do it chronologically, but it's very important to make the topography of the crime. First of all, for us, because we don't know the landscape, we don't know the place, for us to understand how the execution was conducted, and also to understand to see if the witness is lying, or if the witness is like inventing something, or we won't say lying because he will not do it on purpose, just lie. But for instance, maybe his memory is distorted after all those years, after all those, like they talk, collective memory is also very present in the village because they talk between themselves. So it's important for us to make the topography, to ask where the policemen were, where the Jews were standing, where the shooters were standing, to understand if it's logic, what the witness says. And then it's the witness basically who makes this diagram. Is after us, we do it just more nicely presenting it. So to understand, for example, this is the Jews, I'm sorry, it's in French, but I'll try to translate. So the Jews, basically, they arrived by trucks or on foot, and then they were coming from the road and going inside the pit. The Ukrainian who were forced towards the execution, they were standing here, like about at 4 meters from there, and there were two shooters who would shoot the Jews who were going inside the pit, and one shooter here. So when we ask to describe, we can see, for example, if the shooters are not in the place, we can say, but how it happened, if the shooter shoots, he would hit someone. So in this case, the witness explained no, because they wouldn't shoot directly, because you can imagine if the shooters are here and the Ukrainian people are here, you can think that maybe they just shoot and they would hit the Ukrainians. But then the witness explained no, they were shooting inside the pit. It was like this. So it's very important for us to make this kind of diagrams to understand not only the crime scene, but also to understand the testimony itself. We try to take the witnesses to the places, but due to their age or health condition or condition of the weather, sometimes it's swampy, like there is a lot of swamp, mud, and it's impossible to get inside, to get the witness to the place. So we ask them to make this kind of drawings that we use after for our investigations. This is a topography of the crime, and just to show you, this is the Jewish school where the Jews were at the beginning gathered. Then they were all taken to the stadium where they were gathered with the local population. And then all this column was walking till the execution site. So you see, it's rather, this execution site is rather far from the village. Back then it was smaller. So it's very In this case, if the witness wasn't forced to see the execution, to watch the executions, it's very probably that we wouldn't find any other witness to the execution, because the site is rather far from the village. But in many cases, the execution site take place just in the cemetery or just outskirts of the village, so people can see what happens. This I talk already about the Holocaust victims. This also the same witness who provide the picture of himself. This is him and his friend, Jewish friend. We do have as well a Jewish rabbi from time to time in our trips. It's just for us to he supervise the work that we do, and also from time to time, if we find mass graves which were dig out by marauders, he is the one who who says Kaddish and who provides a proper burial for those victims, once again, whose souls were disturbed. But in general, like I said, we're 10, and there is investigators, there's 2 translators, there's 1 interviewer, and team leader is the same, 1 photographer, 1 cameraman, and 1 person who takes the notes during all the interviews. Let's say he just make like a small report of what was said during the interview and during the trip itself. If there is a possibility, we not only identify the places that connected to the Holocaust by bullets, like the places of confinement, the ghettos, the camps, the execution site itself, the columns, but also we identify the places because we have many requests from the families who either immigrated before the war or whose family members were murdered during the war. So they send the request information and we take pictures of the remaining Jewish houses, remaining Jewish cemeteries, synagogues, just to be able to show them what the village of their parents, of their great parents looks like today. And I will finish with this, is the list of topics that we ask our witnesses and that you can find in the interviews. Like I said, it's pre-war period. It's also the information about the pre-war life, the interaction between Jewish and non-Jewish community. What did the Jews do? Because in some cases, especially if they're the cases of the Jewish collective farms that were in the south of Ukraine, they were created in 1920s, and basically it's where only Jews who lived there, and during the Holocaust they were all killed. So the non-Jewish population are the only living memories of this community. So they're the only one could provide us at least any information, give at least some names if they remember. So we always ask about this. Basically, like all the events connected to the Holocaust, to the steps of the crimes. We also have testimonies not only about collaboration, but also about the saving righteous, those who are not recognized as righteous, but they try to rescue, to help, to provide some kind of help if there's food, or just to give a hiding place for a couple of days. So these kind of testimonies we have. We have also deportations in Poland, as you know, and also sometimes Western Ukraine and Bessarabia. Actually, there was a lot of deportation actually. So we have not only the testimonies about deportation, but we tried with different testimonies. For instance, there were Jews who were deported from Bessarabia, today's Chernivtsi region of, southeastern part of Ukraine and Romania. The Jews were from there deported to the Transnistria, so-called area, which today's south region of Vinnytsia and Odessa and Mykolaiv a little bit. So and basically we traveled all over this territory. So with each testimony from each place, we managed to make the routes from, for example, if they were deported from Chernivtsi, they were deported to Mohyliv, Podilsky, and after like this. So with all the testimonies from all parts of Eastern Europe, like by cross references, once again, these testimonies were able to reconstruct more or less. Of course, there's always, I'm not generalize, don't want to generalize, there is always some details, but in some cases we do able to reconstruct the crimes and reconstruct the history that is missing. So thank you very much. Just a small conclusion. To say that the shootings were not secret. They, as we say, they were conducted in broad daylight. There's a lot of witnesses that saw what happened and they're willing to speak. And unfortunately, the time is passing by, and there's less and less witnesses now. Although I was surprised, even last year, we still went to the trip, and there were people, especially in Vinnytsia region. There were a lot of Jews before the war there. In Vinnytsia region, there is people who were born in 20s, like 1926, 1928, and they're still alive, and they still remember and give their testimony. So we still find people, we still find elderly people, but of course, with time, there are less and less. And these testimonies of neighbors are the crucial source to understanding the reality of the genocide, because the genocide is really complex. The Holocaust by bullets is complex. Each territory, each region, even I wouldn't say country, but each region of the country is completely different. The method of killings are completely different. So it's really important to understand the Holocaust by bullets and then take in consideration not only it's important to take in consideration the historical background, the cultural background, and all the circumstances that were at place back then. So thank you very much for your attention. Sorry for the technical details, and I still have time for question, I guess.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It's so lovely to hear about the work, the sheer scope of the work that you're doing, and yet the high quality of this work, how specific it is, how much goes into it. It's really, I mean, how grateful we are to Yahad-In Unum for doing this important work and explaining something that so few people knew about. We do have time, we'll quickly have time for a few questions. I know I'm looking through the chat and people are just showering you in praise. I see Carl has your hands up. I'm not sure if this is again, we've got more praise for you, taking us through the process of historical research, being exposed to the painstaking and highly detailed reconstruction and checking and cross-checking. The vast array of sources and evidence, being exposed to all of this was the most precious gift. This academic road trip through this terrifyingly tragic series of events was mesmerizing. Thank you, Carol, such a beautiful thing. Carl, I see that your hand is raised. Did you have a question? I don't know if you want to type it in the chat or ask it, if you want to unmute yourself and ask it.
I've just placed it in the chat, but what I wanted to say thank you to Katarina and to the Holocaust Centers, just from the point of view of a history teacher and an aspiring historian. These are just incredibly powerful tools, and they just help to bridge the gap and to address the criticisms that people have of eyewitness accounts. And what I found so powerful about the Joburg Holocaust Museum was shifting the whole exhibition to the culture. This was a culture. These were real people. These were real lives that were destroyed. That makes the Joburg exhibition so powerful. And when it comes to what Katarina has just shared with us, for those critics and naysayers and deniers and so on, you know what? I'm not saying there isn't an emotional side to this. But as I watch this, it doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter what you feel. When you put that stuff up in a courtroom, like a crime scene, and you put it up there, you just avoid any of the usual excuses that people might have for questioning. And there you look at it. And I think the metaphor as well of the thing as a crime scene, not as a place of heartbreak, which of course it is, but calling it what it was. It is a crime scene. And that kind of rational scientific approach doesn't detract from the heartache, but it reaches a far bigger audience, I think. So I just wanted to say thank you to Katarina and to the center for that contribution to history as a science. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I've seen we've got quite a few more questions coming in. We'll just answer a few. Mervyn asks, do they ever bring items that were looted from the community or refer to items in villages that they know about?
Yes, we do find witnesses who still kept the items, for example, forks or spoons. I think recently we found out a witness who transported Jews on the horse cart, and he still kept this cart. So some of they give us the items. There was also a witness who had a leather bag. He granted us the bag. So some of the items which are easily transported, we take them to the museum. We share them because we have a museum, Holocaust Museum in Guatemala, with a permanent exhibit. So most of the items are taken there, but we also have a partnership with Caen Memorial Museum in France, in north of France. So they have part of our items. And I guess also some parts are in Washington Memorial Museum.
Wonderful. That's so fascinating to know. And I didn't know there was a center in Guatemala. I'd love to visit that one. We've got another question here. Does your organization do any work in what was the former Yugoslavia?
Former Yugoslavia, yes, we do have. It's more complicated. We had one trip actually in former Yugoslavia, just like a pilot trip, which gives us also many interesting information. But for us, it's more difficult to work in countries, European countries, or that are part of the European Union, for political reason mostly, and also because witnesses, or in these cases, it's their children and grandchildren, they are more aware of the consequences of such information if they say it out loud. So this is the case for us in Lithuania, Estonia, Poland. They're more reticent to give their stories. I'm not talking about the witnesses themselves, because they say, I'm old, I don't care, but my family will still stay here. So it's a little bit complicated. And also we noticed during the research trips that it's more complicated to get a testimony in the village where a local population participated somehow. So I'm not talking about the collaborators, the policemen, but like if they were looting, massive looting, if they went to the grave and undressed after the bodies, this kind of participation, it's more difficult to get the information and to make the witnesses speak.
Okay, yeah, that makes so much sense. Tully and Nace just wanted us to point out that the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center does indeed have some of these objects that Yahad-In Unum gave to us. So when we reopen after the fourth wave, please do come and see it. I'm going to ask just one final question because I'm aware of time. Gita asks, you mentioned that many witnesses have been waiting for someone to come and listen to their reports. Do they give you reasons why?
Yes, it was Soviet Union. So it was after the war. First of all, they had, because basically the war was happening on these territories, Ukraine, Russia, Poland, let's say, and they had to rebuild their country. First of all, then there was the hunger. I mean, in 47, and the conditions were difficult. Then it was Stalin regime. So during the Stalin regime, it was very dangerous to speak, first of all. And also in the Soviet Union, there were no Jewish people, because even if you see the monuments that were built under the Soviet regime and in the Soviet Union, you would not see any information, or in the archives also, they say that they were Soviet citizens of Jewish nationality, of Jewish identity. In the monuments, they were just Soviet citizens. So it was forbidden to say that they were Jewish, let's say. So all this reason make that the witnesses didn't talk, because in Soviet culture, it's not common to talk about what you feel, about what you saw. I mean, the most important is the common collective good. You work for that, and that's all. So there's many reasons why they didn't talk until now, and that's why nobody asked them neither until now what they saw.
Well, thank you so much for ending the silence and bringing the story to us. This is all the time we have at the moment of the session. We are having 4 seminars. If you've signed up to this one, which you have because you're here, you are immediately registered for the next 4. They will be happening on the 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd, respectively, all at this time, 4 o'clock on a Thursday. Katarina will be with us again next week to look at the pedagogical tips and tools that goes from field research to bringing this into the classroom. So for our educators, this is a very important session about talking about how we do teach this part of the Holocaust that is so often neglected. How do we bring it to students? And we look so forward to having you there. This talk, like all of ours, will be up on our YouTube channel. You will all receive a link as soon as it is live. And thank you for joining us on behalf of the entire South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you. Bye.